Sometimes, when somebody gets their green card through marriage, they find themselves in a situation where the marriage, through no fault of their own, just isn't working out. And they are really afraid to get divorced because they're worried that they can get deported. And when I consult with people about this situation, they are oftentimes very scared and they have a lot of questions about what will happen to me if I end up separating or getting divorced from my US citizen spouse. So today we're going to be talking about what the consequences might be of separation or divorce, what the ongoing obligations for the US citizen might be under the affidavit of support, and whether the US citizen can cancel the immigrant spouse's green card. If you're new to my channel, I'm Puyan Darian, an immigration lawyer here to talk to you about immigration law. I did a video on this topic a few years ago that gained a lot of traction, a lot of comments on it. So I'm doing this updated video to answer some of those questions and provide more information. So the first thing is, will you get deported if you separate or get divorced from your spouse? And the answer is probably not, but it depends. So the first thing is, if you get separated or divorced before you attend your first green card interview or before you get your conditional green card, then your green card application will get denied, almost certainly. If your green card application gets denied, your case can be transferred to immigration court, but that's a matter of government policy. For example, historically, there are certain times where the government will say every application that gets denied will get transferred to immigration court. This happened under Trump's last term. Currently, under Biden, which is when I'm shooting this video, that is not the case. If a green card application gets denied, it will typically end with you getting a denial decision. Whether it's because you guys didn't attend the interview, or because the US citizen spouse didn't attend the interview, or because you were no longer in a good faith marriage at the time that immigration was ready to decide your green card application. Now, oftentimes, someone has their conditional green card, but they haven't removed the conditions, and now things are really beginning to fall apart. And they realize that their marriage is not salvageable. They really can't keep going on living with their spouse. And a question I regularly receive is something like, well, my US citizen spouse and I are on good terms. They don't want to hurt me. We can just, stay in the same house or stay separated, but they said they'll go to the green card interview with me in the future. And my answer to whether that's a good plan is usually, no, that's not really a good plan. If you're sure that this marriage isn't going to be savable, you should just get divorced as soon as possible. We can still remove the conditions on your green card if we can demonstrate that your marriage was in good faith at the beginning. So before you guys separate, save as much evidence as possible, because it might be harder to get some of those documents after you get legally divorced. Once you get legally divorced, we can apply to remove the conditions on your residency, and we need to include as much evidence as possible that your marriage was entered into in good faith. What I mean when I say that your documents are easier to get when you're living together is, let's say, for example, you guys filed some joint tax returns, and it's the US citizen spouse that was really in charge of that because they were more familiar with the tax system in the United States. I mean, while you're living together, it might be easier for you to get copies of that, get copies of bank accounts, and all of your joint evidence might be much more accessible while you're still living together. If you're considering separating or getting divorced, now is a really good time to speak with an immigration lawyer before you make any life-changing decisions, because if you're going to get separated or divorced, I strongly recommend using an immigration lawyer to try to remove the conditions on your residency. Now, let's say that you've already removed the conditions on your residency, or you never had a conditional residency because you were married for more than 2 years when you got your green card. So you received the 10-year green card correctly right off the bat. In that situation, getting divorced or separated shouldn't really affect anything. The only thing that might get affected is the timeline for your citizenship. Because if you continue to remain married and living together, you can typically apply for citizenship after just 3 years of permanent residence. And if you end up getting divorced before you apply for citizenship, or even separated, then you would need to wait the full 5 years just like everyone else before you apply for US citizenship. And this actually brings me to the next topic, which is what are the US citizens' continuing obligations under the affidavit of support? Well, actually, even if you get divorced, the US citizen still has ongoing obligations pursuant to the affidavit of support. If the immigrant spouse's income ever falls below the minimum level, which is 125% of the federal poverty guidelines, and they sue or take legal action against the US citizen to enforce that obligation, the US citizen might be still financially on the hook. These obligations will end when either the immigrant spouse becomes a US citizen or has worked for 40 qualifying quarters. That typically means 10 years if you're working continuously without any breaks. After that period of time, the affidavit of support obligations will no longer be in effect. Sometimes I'll receive a question from the US citizen spouse who is upset that they're getting divorced or separated from their immigrant spouse, and they don't want the immigrant spouse to keep their green card that the US citizen spouse feels like they gave to their immigrant spouse. And so sometimes the question will be like, I don't want them to be in the US anymore. Can I take away their green card? Well, first of all, I'm in the business of working really hard to give people immigration benefits, help them apply for immigration benefits. So please don't contact my office or try to call me for assistance in getting someone deported from the United States. But while we are on the topic, I've seen situations where US citizen spouses will go through extraordinary lengths to try to ruin the immigration status of their spouse. The important thing to understand if you're the immigrant spouse is if you've entered the marriage in good faith, the US citizen spouse won't be able to do a whole lot to ruin your status or prevent you from being able to remove the conditions on your residency. Perhaps if the US citizen spouse can prove that you completely engaged in fraud and tricked them to get married for an immigration benefit, and they submit evidence of this to USCIS, for example, while you're trying to remove the conditions on your residency, they might be successful because now it'll be your job to prove that you entered the marriage in good faith, and you won't have the assistance of your US citizen spouse. If your US citizen spouse and you filed your petition to remove conditions jointly, and that application, the I-751, is still pending, the US citizen spouse can contact USCIS and ask them to remove their signature on that form, to withdraw from that form. If that happens, you're gonna be in a tough spot where you need to take immediate action. At that point, you really need to contact an immigration lawyer, in my opinion. USCIS will send you a request for evidence saying that your spouse is no longer joining your petition to remove conditions on residency, and you need to apply for one of the other options available. And your options may be very limited in that situation, which is why I recommend speaking with an immigration lawyer. If you are a conditional resident or a permanent resident and you're considering separating or getting divorced from your spouse and you need some legal representation or some advice, please feel free to contact me. You can book a consultation directly through my website or by calling my office. Also, if you're new to this channel and you appreciate this information, You can put any of your questions in the comments below. I really do make an effort to answer them within a few weeks of posting the video. And be sure to like and subscribe.